How to avoid the mark of the beast. How many of you heard about the mark of the beast? Let's start with this question. We've all heard about this mark of the beast. And I don't want to jump the gun and start talking about stuff from tomorrow. That's where we're going to identify it. Today, we're going to look how we can avoid it. So you might think to yourself, well, how can you tell us how to avoid it before you tell us what the mark of the beast is? Well, you're going to figure out tonight. That's what tonight is for. So let me start with this question. And all of us are thinking of this question. How in the world did we get into the mess that the world is in right now? When you look at the world, we realize that we have some significant problems going on right now, right? There are political problems, there are social problems, there are financial problems, but how did we get to this place? For us to understand this, we need to get back in history, all the way back to heaven. God created angels. One of them was named Lucifer. Now we know that Lucifer rebelled against God, and that started this mess that we are in. But why did Lucifer rebel? Did God wire him wrong? Did God plant seeds of rebellion in his heart? What made Lucifer go against God? So we're going to find the answers to these questions tonight. And you may be surprised to know that the reason that Lucifer rebelled because he had an eye problem. We find that in the book of Isaiah, chapter 14. Let's open together to Isaiah, chapter 14, and verses 12 to 14. And it says, "How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nation. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation on the farthest side of the north. I will ascend above the highest of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." So Lucifer had an eye problem. He put himself first, and as a result, we have this mess that we are in. Because of his rebellion, we have all the problems that we see in the world today. Long ago, God gave Lucifer the privilege of being able to choose. And he exercised his ability. But unfortunately, he chose the wrong way. God gives us the same opportunity. We got to choose whether we want to follow him or we want to go against him. But God in his mercy warns us against choosing the wrong direction. And these warnings, they come in the book of Revelation. Let's open our Bibles to Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 to 9. Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 to 9. And it says, "And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought. But they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him." So Lucifer chose to rebel, but he didn't choose to rebel on his own. He took some others with him. And when he was cast out of heaven, he came down to this earth. And when he got here, he began to sow the same seed of rebellion that he sowed in heaven. So he deceived Adam and Eve, and down through the time, he succeeded in deceiving others. And there is no one better at deceiving people than the devil. He managed to deceive Adam and Eve, and he, of course, has managed to deceive us in our lives as well. It can be difficult to make the right choices in this life, right? To know right from wrong. So God in his mercy sent us a special message for our day to help us know which side to be on. And where do we find this message? Revelation 14, verses 6 to 10. Let's read it together. Revelation 14, verses 6 to 10. Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people. So this message is to everybody. We are included in it as well. Verse 7, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water. What does the first angel tell us? Worship Jesus. Worship the Creator. And another angel followed, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. We're going to look at Babylon in a coming night. And we're going to understand this verse exactly. But then let's continue. Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worship the beast and his image, and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And God is saying in the third message, do not worship the Antichrist. Do not worship the beast. Otherwise, you're going to get the mark on your forehead or on your right hand. Which mark is that? The mark of the beast. This is the one we're trying to avoid, and God is telling us, don't get that. So, for us, so far, this message has been very familiar. Why? Because we go on it on and on every time. Why? Because we don't want to end up on the wrong side of things in history. We know that the big issue at the end is what? Worship. It's an issue of worship, and we know that the highest form of worship is what? Obedience. Ultimately, the whole world will be divided into two camps. And describing our day, Revelation 12:17 says the following. Let's read it together. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So we see that the devil is angry with the church. He's angry with the church. And what are the two characteristics that this church have? They keep the commandments of God, all of them, and they have the testimony of Jesus Christ, which we know from Revelation 19:10 that it is the spirit of prophecy. So the devil is angry with this church. He is doing whatever he can to dissuade people from believing what the Bible has to say. He's doing whatever he can to dissuade people from joining that church, that movement. The devil doesn't want people to making commitments to be part of a commandment-keeping people. So how does God impress upon people the importance of making a full commitment to him and his message? We see that Revelation chapter 13. So let's look at verses 1 to 8, and then we're going to look at verses 15 to 18. We're just recapping what we have already covered in this seminar. So let's look at Revelation 13, 1 to 8. It says, Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and a great authority. And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. So they worshipped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And he was given authority to continue for 42 months. And then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. So who is this beast talking about? We looked at this, the first beast of Revelation. We're talking about the Vatican or the papacy, right? So, and then who's the second beast of Revelation? Start verse 15 and 18 to 18. It says, we're still continuing on the second beast. It says, he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads. So we see that the second beast contributes in forcing this mark on the forehead or on the right arm. So I understand much of these verses because we've covered it in the seminar so far many times. But now we find ourselves in the book of Revelation, and we want to avoid the mark of the beast, right? And what other book we need to go to understand that when we talk about prophecy? That's the book of Daniel. So we're going to go to the book of Daniel, and I want you to go to Daniel chapter 3. But while you're getting there, I want to show you one verse in Daniel 12:4. It says, "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end." The Bible tells us that the book of Daniel would not be completely understood until the time of the end. Well, that's good news for us, right? Why? Because we're living in the time of the end. It is the time of the end. So we should be able to understand in greater detail what's going on in the book of Daniel. So as you look at the book of Daniel, it's important to understand a few things about this book. The book of Daniel is divided into two parts. The first one is prophecies, and the second one is stories. So the prophecies of Daniel tell us when the last days will arrive. And what kind of prophecies that we studied so far? Can you remind me of some of them? We have the prophecy in Daniel chapter 2, right? The metallic man. And then we have the 70 weeks prophecy. We have the 2,300 years prophecy. We studied about it this morning. All of these are prophecies that we find in the book of Daniel. And then we have the stories in the book of Daniel that tells us how to live in the last days. And as we're living right now in the last days, we need these stories to understand. How do we prepare ourselves for the challenges that are going to come, for the trials that are going to come? The stories in the book of Daniel tells us how to do that. So the recurring issues in both the stories and prophecies are worship and obedience. Every time I look at the book of Daniel, it's two things, worship and obedience. Just like Revelation 14, just like the three angels' messages, is telling us to worship and to be obedient. However, when we see in the book of Daniel that is revealing the strategies that Satan used to attack. Three things: attack the Lord, attack his law, and attack the loyal. So tonight we're going to be looking at Daniel chapter 3, and we see how the story tonight, the devil is trying to attack who? The loyal. And tonight, as we look at this story, and we're going to walk through Daniel chapter 3, we need to see, and we're going to see, what lessons we get, what lessons we learn about how to avoid the mark of the beast. Remember, as I said, the stories in the book of Daniel tells us how to live in the last days. And in the last days, the mark of the beast is going to be the big issue that divides the world. So in this simple story, we will gain valuable insight that will help us to avoid receiving the mark. So at this time of Daniel chapter 3, Babylon was a very wealthy empire, a very powerful empire, a very influential empire, and a significant event took place in Daniel chapter 3. Let's look at it. Chapter 3, verse 1. It says, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and its width 60 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. So what was the image made of? Gold. Where was it located? In the plain of Dura, which is modern-day Iraq. How tall was it? 60 cubits. And how wide is it? 6 cubits. Does this remind me of something? Vaguely a number? 666? Right? So how high is 60 cubits? That's about like 90 feet high. And engineers have looked at this and they figured out in order to hold a 90 feet high statue in the sandy plains of Dura, you may need another 30-foot base. So the statue would have been about 120 feet tall, standing in the desert of Iraq. Do you think a 120 feet tall statue in the desert would stand out? Definitely, right? So why did Nebuchadnezzar build this 120-foot tall image in the middle of the desert? He was doing something specific, something intentional. Do you remember the story back in Daniel chapter 2? Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that he couldn't remember, right? He called his wise men in and he asked them to tell him his dream and its interpretation, but they couldn't. So he sent a command for all of them to be killed, all the wise men. However, when Daniel found out about it, he asked to meet the king, and after he met the king, he asked to be given some time to give him the dream and its interpretation. So he prayed to God, and God gave him the dream and its interpretation. Then the next day, Daniel went back to the king and told him what God had shared with him. So let's refresh our memories, because this was like the first night of the seminar. So let's refresh our memories. Daniel 2, the metallic man. The head was what? Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar that the head of gold represented the kingdom of who? Babylon. And you can be very sure that this made Nebuchadnezzar very happy, right? But Daniel also had some bad news to deliver to him, because there would be another kingdom that comes after him, which is the chest of silver, Medo-Persia. After that, there will be the thighs of bronze, Greece. And after Greece, the legs of iron, Rome. And after that, the tribes of Europe, which represented by the feet of iron and clay. But what comes after that is the rock, which represents Christ's eternal kingdom. So the good news for us is that very soon Jesus is coming back. He's coming back again. Why? Because we're living at the feet of the statue. The next thing is going to happen is that Jesus is going to come back again, and he's going to have a kingdom that will never end. So when we jump from Daniel chapter 2 to Daniel chapter 3, there are between 8 to 9 years between the two events. And we discovered that the clay tablet reports that a serious mutiny erupted in Nebuchadnezzar's army in December 594 in the 10th year of his reign. So when this mutiny erupted in his army, what do you think was going in Nebuchadnezzar's mind? He's thinking that, well, this is what's going to start the next empire, the end of his reign. So what do you think he did to deal with these mutineers? Do you think he would have treated them with a kid's glove? No, absolutely not. Nebuchadnezzar doesn't do that. This is what he did. Nebuchadnezzar squelched the rebellion and slew many of his own army. His own hand captured his enemy. That's according to the Wiseman Chronicles, page 73. So Nebuchadnezzar killed and captured many of his mutineers, but he was very wise ruler as well. He realized that he might not have gotten everybody. So he came up with a plan. He was going to erect an image, the one similar to the one he had seen in his dream, but he's going to change it a little bit. This new image that he's erecting, he makes the entire image out of gold. What was the point that he's trying to make? He was trying to send the message that his kingdom, the kingdom of Babylon, would never come to an end. There is no kingdom coming after me. From the top of the head till the soles of the feet, the image was entirely of gold. Then he planned to invite all the influential people in the kingdom to come out to this dedication of the image. This way he could root out any people who were not completely supportive of him. Let's continue reading Daniel chapter 3, verses 2 and 3. It says, and King Nebuchadnezzar sent a word to gather together the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the province to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the province gathered together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So we read all of these, and then verses 4 and 5 says, then a herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So it was a smart plan. Here in this one event, he would be able to root out all those who were disloyal to him. If they didn't bow down to this image as he commanded, what would happen to them? Verse 6, and whose falleth not down and worship shall the same hour be cast into the midst of burning fiery furnace. So he would tell them, you will go to the fire, to the furnace that is right there. So here in this deceptively simple story that we see in Daniel chapter 3, we find 7 keys to understanding the mark of the beast. This story gives us incredible insight into the events that are going to take place in the last days of Earth's history surrounding the mark of the beast. So the first key that involves a powerful king. In Daniel chapter 3, the king is Nebuchadnezzar. At the end time, it will be something else, and we'll look at that in a little bit. The second key is that it involves a twisted truth. God gave Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel a pure picture of what the future looks like. The multi-metal man gave an accurate picture of the rise and fall of the kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar took that truth and twisted it. He kept the statue, he kept one of the metals, but he changed the remainder of it. That's often how the devil works. He takes truth, but he doesn't completely change it, but he twisted it so that it involves error. Number 3, the third key is based on paganism. The statue was 60 cubits high, 6 cubits wide, and we could also expect that it would be 6 cubits deep. That should remind us of the number in the book of Revelation, 666. Number 4, All the nations are commanded to do something. In this case, everybody was commanded to bow down and worship the image. In the end time, we know that the whole world is going to be commanded to receive the mark of the beast and worship the Antichrist. Number 5, the fifth key is that the people are influenced by a spirit of a nationalistic revival. Here in this story, the nation is Babylon. The idea is being put forth that what's good for the nation is good for the people. If we bond together as a nation, we'll be better off as a people. The same approach is going to be exercised at the end time. The sixth key is that worship is compelled. Now, worship is a good thing. Worship is a healthy thing. But when someone compels you to worship a particular way against your own will, that's a very bad thing. And in this case, people are being compelled to worship this image, whether they like it or not, whether they want or not. Again, we see a parallel with the mark of the beast. And finally, number 7, people are threatened with death. So here we see 7 keys to help us understand the issue surrounding the mark of the beast. 7 keys that can help us make wise decisions when we are faced whether or not we want to receive the mark. So picture this. Imagine you lived in Babylon 2,500 years ago, and you went out to your Babylonian mailbox, and you opened it up. Inside was a fancy envelope that came from the king. It was an invitation to a very exclusive party. As you read the invitation, you found that you were being invited to a party with all the influential people in the kingdom, the movers and the shakers. All the people that you knew it would be a good idea to rub elbows and network with. This party would give everybody a chance to get to know one another better and to build and strengthen the kingdom of Babylon. There was going to be lots of food, lots of drink, there would be music, the king would be there, and then there would be a dedication of a brand new golden image. So the invitation said, at one point during the party, music would begin to play, and when that happened, everybody would bow down and worship the image. And if you didn't, they will kill you. Now, how can you resist that invitation? And yet, here is a picture of what will happen at the very end as well. So what accusations did the other wise men make against the 3 Hebrews? Let's read verse 7. So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, flute, harp, and lyre and symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and language fell down and worshipped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. Now, question, who are these Chaldeans? We remember them from the story from Daniel chapter 2, right? They were some of Daniel and his friends' classmates in the Babylonian University. These were some of the guys who were outshined by their fellow Jewish classmates. At the end of Daniel 1, when Daniel and his friends chose not to defile themselves with the food that the king gave them, Daniel and his friend ended up being 10 times wiser than the Chaldeans. So in Daniel 2, we run into these guys again, and they are the ones that Nebuchadnezzar called for them to tell them the dream and interpret it, and they failed. And when Daniel goes and he interprets the dream, they are looking bad, right? So again, here we come to Daniel chapter 3, and how do you know that, or how do you think these Chaldeans are feeling about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? They probably don't like them very much, right? And imagine, think about it this way. Nebuchadnezzar one day is just walking through the halls of his palace, and he sees a group of these Chaldeans standing around talking. He walks up behind them and he just smacks them on the back of the head. What's wrong with you guys? Why are you letting these Jewish people, outsmart you? You're Chaldeans, you should be better. So the Chaldeans are looking for a way to get rid of them. They're jealous of them. They're angry at them. So let's continue verse 9. They spoke and they said to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Now, what they're doing right here is setting up the king for a fall. Watch this. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery is in symphony with all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the gold image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. At this point, Nebuchadnezzar was feeling pretty good about himself, right? He was thinking, yes, that's right. That's what I said. And that's what I expect to happen. Verse 12. There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And here is where all the Chaldeans pull the rug from under Nebuchadnezzar. They say, there are certain Jews who you have set rulers. And they even know their names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They tell Nebuchadnezzar that he himself made a mistake, that he never should have appointed them, these captured Jews, and he should not have gave them any prominent position in Babylon. Let's continue. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up. And what else do they say about these Chaldeans? Or what do we know about these Chaldeans? Well, when the music began to play, the instruction was that everyone was to bow down and worship the image. Now the question is, how did these Chaldeans know that these three men did not worship? Evidently, they were peeking. They were not worshiping. They themselves, they were not worshiping either. How do you know unless you're looking? If they were closing their eyes, they would have not known. So why did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refuse to bow down to the idol? We find the answer in Exodus 20:4-6. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. You know, from the time they were like knee-high unto grasshopper, these Hebrews, they knew and they've been taught about the Ten Commandments. They knew that in the Ten Commandments, you don't worship carved images. So when it came for the big test, they were ready. They had already settled their minds that no matter what's the cost, they were not going to sin. They were not going to break one of God's commandments. So what threats did Nebuchadnezzar make against them? Let's read verses 13-15. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they brought these men before the king. You know, the king, Nebuchadnezzar, is not having a good day so far. He recently had the rebellion that he needed in his army that he needed to squash. And he lost a lot of good men in his army. But then he realized that he needed to save his kingdom. So he came up with this idea to have a party and dedicate the image. Everyone showed up like they were supposed to and were enjoying themselves. The food and the drink and all of that was good. Then the music began to play and all of a sudden, things went bad. Now his wise men are blaming him of this disruption of the festivities. Verse 14, Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up? Notice at first how he does not believe that accusation is true. He asked the three young men, Is it true what they've said about you? He doesn't want to believe that it's true. But he realized that his kingdom is on the line. So he says, I'll give you another chance. I like you guys. I don't want to lose you. But my kingdom is at stake. So I'm going to play the music again. And when you hear it play, I expect you to bow down. But if you don't, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Did the three Hebrews have to think their decision over? Verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. They didn't need time to think about this. They didn't need time to think about their decision. They were firm in it. Why? Because God's law is very clear. They didn't need to go and ask God, did you really mean what you said? Do you think, how would God have responded to them? He said, what part of my commandment wasn't clear? I thought I was pretty clear. It says, don't bow down and worship images. Is that confusing? What kind of insult would have been to God? He made it very plain. There was no ambiguity. No need to think or to ask him if he really meant what he said. They had established in their minds long ago that they're going to serve God rather than men. Does this remind you something in the New Testament? Something that Peter said in Acts chapter 5? Peter said, and then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than man. So how did the Hebrews respond to their second chance? Verse 17. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. They were confident that God could and would deliver them from the fiery furnace. But look at the next verse, it's very significant. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. So their obedience to God was not dependent on him delivering them. They said, we believe that you can and that you will deliver us. But if not, they would not disobey God. So what is your relationship with God? How is it like? Have you decided that you are going to follow him no matter what? That you will obey him no matter what? Even if others aren't like this? Even if others are not doing what you're supposed to do? Even if your decision is not popular, even though it's the right one? Even if that decision is going to make you lose your job? Maybe it's going to make your family upset with you? Are you prepared to follow God no matter what? That's where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were in their relationship with God. So how did Nebuchadnezzar respond to the Hebrews' response? Verse 19. Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. Now, think about this to begin with. Why was there a furnace near this image that was erected? Did he just build that to incinerate people who didn't bow down? No, of course not. What was the image made of? Gold. And how do you think that they melted the gold? In the furnace. And what do you think that they used as fuel to heat the furnace? Well, what is the Middle East known for? Oil, right? And how do you think they knew when it was heated 7 times hotter than the usual? Maybe they had some thermometer back then or something, right? The Bible doesn't tell us exactly how they did it, but we know for sure that it was very hot. The fire was very hot, and actually in verse 1 it says, he commanded certain mighty men of valor valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and their other garments, and they were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. What do you think was going through the minds of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as they were being bound to be thrown into the furnace? Do you think that they were a little bit nervous? Imagine what would it have been like when the music plays, they're the only one standing. Then they are dragged before the king, and the king is furious with them. He gives them a second chance, and they reject it. Now he's even more furious. So he calls for the mightiest men he ever has in his army to tie them up. Everybody's looking at them, and they're heating the furnace to be burned in it 7 times more. Beds of sweats probably forming on their foreheads. The robes are starting to stick to their backs. The king is screaming at them. And you can be sure that the devil is whispering in their ears. What do you think the devil is telling them? Maybe something like this. Now listen, boys. How do you think your God is going to be glorified if you die here today? You want everybody to know how powerful your God is? But if you die, he's going to be looking incredibly weak. You don't want that, do you? Look down. Your sandals are untied. Why don't you just ask the king to play the music again? And when he does play the music, bend over and tie your sandals. The king will think that you worship the image. Of course you're not. God knows your heart. God knows that you're not going to worship. He knows that you love him. But if you do this, you will be able to live and to witness for God in another day. There's no good that you're going to die in the furnace. So tell Nebuchadnezzar to start the music. It's just and you will be good. Just go down, tie your shoes. Have you ever heard the devil say something like this to you? When you knew the right thing to do, but you knew that you did the wrong thing because if you did the right thing, it would cost you something. And that's the way that the devil loves to work. So what happened to the soldiers who threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fiery furnace? This shows you that how hot was the fire. Verse 22, therefore, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This fire was pretty hot because it burned up the soldiers who threw the 3 young men in. They weren't in, they were still outside, and they died. But I want you to notice something very important here. Those who obeyed the command of man were killed. And those who obeyed the command of God were saved. Ultimately, we have to decide who are we going to obey. Paul says that you are the servants of the one who choose to obey. And who do you think can best take care of us? Is it man or is it God? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego decided that it was God. So how were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thrown into the furnace? Verse 23, and these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. What did Nebuchadnezzar see when he looked back inside the furnace? This is important. Verse 24 and 25. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and they said to the king, true, O king. Look, he answered, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Now, how do you think Nebuchadnezzar knew that the form of the 4th was like the Son of God? How did he know who was the Son of God? Well, clearly, Daniel and his friends had been a powerful witness to Nebuchadnezzar. In Daniel 1, he made them a decision. They made the decision to follow God in their dietary choices and put their lives on the line. God honored this, and they were promoted. In Daniel 2, Daniel asked the king for him to give him some time so that God will tell him about the dream. God answered Daniel's prayer and the king's mystery about the image. All that was solved. Evidently, Daniel and his friends had spent some time with the king, telling the king about the God that they serve, the one who made them 10 times wiser, the one who was able to tell the king his dream and its interpretation. So when the Son of God appears in the fire with the 3 Hebrews, Nebuchadnezzar knows who he is. How many individuals did Nebuchadnezzar see in the fiery furnace? Verse 25, he says, I see 4 men loose. Do you ever wonder what they talked about while they were in the fire? I wonder if Jesus told them where the cooler spots were to stand in the fire. Maybe he said, well, here you stand over here. It's cooler here. It's a little bit cooler. Or maybe he told them a little bit about the plan of salvation. How he one day is going to come to earth and die as a sacrifice for our sins. We don't really know what they were talking about, but we know for sure that the 3 Hebrews were encouraged by the conversation. How did Nebuchadnezzar address the 3 Hebrews next? Verse 26. Then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fire furnace and spoke, saying, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire. Now, don't miss this. Just a few minutes ago, the Hebrews disobeyed the command of the king when they told him to bow down, and now when he's telling them to come out, they listen. When he commanded them to bow down, they said, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to obey your command. A few minutes later, the king tells them to come out of the fire, and they obey without hesitation. They listen. Why? What made the difference? It's pretty simple. The first command that the king gave was in contrast to one of God's laws. When he told them to bow down and worship, they refused to do it because it broke one of God's commandments. Now, a few minutes later, when he commands them to come out of the fire, they immediately obey him. Why? Because it did not break any of God's commandments. They always choose to obey the highest authority. When the king's command conflicts with God's commandments, they obeyed God. When the king's command did not conflict with God's commandments, they obeyed the king. So what decree did Nebuchadnezzar make after seeing the 3 Hebrews delivered from the furnace? And the satraps, administrators, governor, and the king's counselors gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not on them. Can you imagine how it looked like on that day? When the 3 Hebrews came out of the fire, the crowd must have pressed around them to check. Everybody's pushing, they want to get a closer look at them. Somebody said, well, wow, look, their clothes are not burned. Somebody said, yeah, their hair is even not singed. And somebody else will say, well, they don't even smell like fire or smoke. The devil had attempted to dissuade them from standing for God. What if they had listened to them? What if they had listened to the devil? They would have missed out on this awesome opportunity to witness for God, who is more powerful than any god of the Babylonians. Right? Verse 28, Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. And they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces. and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. So here we see the king making progress. He's recognizing that the God of the Hebrew is a very powerful God. But he's not fully converted yet. Why? He's threatening to cut people, and he's turning people's houses into ash heaps if they speak against the Hebrew God. He's making progress, but he's not quite yet there. However, if you read the next chapter, you will find that Nebuchadnezzar is converted because of Daniel and his friends and their obedience to God. You can expect to see Nebuchadnezzar in the kingdom of heaven. Let's continue, verse 30. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So the Babylonian king, a powerful world leader, established a counterfeit image and compelled worship contrary to God's command. The coming crisis is similar to the days of Daniel. Revelation chapter 13. Let's look at the parallel issue with the mark of the beast that we see in Revelation chapter 13. What does the second beast of Revelation 13 command the people of the earth to do? Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon, and exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes all the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. We know the identity of the first beast, that is the Vatican or the papacy. And we know the identity of the second beast, that is the United States of America. So the United States is going to use force to get people to worship the Vatican or the papacy. What does the second beast declare the people should make to the first beast? Verse 13, he performed great signs so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. So what are the people asked to do to the image of the beast? Verse 15, he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So what happens to those who refuse to worship the image of the beast? Verse 15, he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. There is a death sentence issued for those who do not receive the mark of the beast, just like in Daniel chapter 3. Well, what other restrictions will be placed upon the righteous? Let's read verses 16 and 17. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. How do we see these 7 keys to help us understand the issue of the mark of the beast in Revelation 13? Key number 1. The powerful king is not Nebuchadnezzar in the last days. The powerful kingdom called the Vatican or the papacy. Key number 2, a twisted truth. It's not a golden statue, it's a Sabbath commandment. In the very end, the worship day is kept, but it's changed from Sabbath to Sunday. A subtle change, but it's a significant one. That's how the devil works. The third key is based on paganism. Sunday is not based on the Bible. It is based on the day of worship of the sun. That's why it's called Sunday. So the twisted truth, just like in Daniel 3, is based on paganism and sun worship. The fourth key, all nations being commanded is seen again in Revelation 13. The United States forces everyone to follow the teachings of the Vatican. The fifth key, influences by spirit of a nationalistic revival, is now no longer around the nation of Babylon, but it's around the United States. An effort is made to strengthen this country by encouraging people to worship together, to set aside all these differences, to find common ground, and thereby strengthen the country. The big problem with this is key number 6. They are compelled to worship a certain way. And as a result, they are threatened with death if they do not go along with the program. Who are we commanded to worship? Let's go back to Revelation 14:7. Saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water. There will be those who get the victory over the beast and his image ultimately stand. Where will they get this victory from? 15:2. And I saw something like a sea of glass mingled with fire, and those who have the victory over the beast, over his image and over his mark and over the number of his name, standing on the sea of glass, having harps of God. So who is the Antichrist beast? What is the mark of the beast? We know the identity of the Antichrist now, right? That's the Vatican or the papacy. Reformers have known it for 500 years already. It's just in relative time and recent times that Christians seem to have forgotten this. And what is the mark of the beast? Someday soon, it will be Sunday worship. It hasn't happened yet because laws have not yet passed. But if the Bible is true, then someday, soon, this is where things are headed. And the vast majority of people will encourage this measure and support it. Only a very few will stubbornly stick to the explicitly stated command of God to remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. Why will they do this? Because they love Jesus more than anything in this life. In the end, everybody will be worshiping. Everybody will be obeying. The question is, who? It will be either Jesus or the Antichrist. They will choose either to obey the commandments of God or to obey the commandments of men. They may choose to simply indicate one with that they have. They will simply choose to follow the one that they want to obey. And through the one that they follow, it will show who they truly love. So how can we avoid the mark of the beast? The same way that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego dealt with the issue of the fiery furnace. They chose to keep and obey God's commandments no matter what. They wouldn't budge, they wouldn't bow, they wouldn't compromise. They have set us a very powerful example of how we should live in the last days. That's why the stories of the book of Daniel are there, to teach us how to live in the last days. So how about you? Have you made your decision yet? Have you decided that you want to obey God's commandments and obey God himself no matter what? Do you love him enough because what he has given for you? How many of you would want to ask Jesus to give us the strength to stand for him in the times of trouble that are coming? If you want to do that, stand with me as we pray. We thank you, Lord, because you've given us a powerful example of how to avoid getting the mark of the beast, how to avoid worshiping the Antichrist. And we thank you, Lord, because it's very clear to us that you are stronger than everything else. And we choose to follow you, we choose to obey you, and we choose to obey your commandments because we love you. We are saved through your grace. We are saved through your blood. And this obedience comes as a response of love to you. We don't want to compromise, no matter what it takes. And we want to surrender our lives to you because you take care of everything that we have and you will take care of us. Bless us tonight, Lord, and help us to come tomorrow to learn more about the mark of the beast so we can be fully aware what is going on based on your truth and your word. Bless us all in Jesus' name. Amen.